Hey everyone, how's it going? Welcome back to another Walking Dead video. So I want to talk about the Walking Dead Daryl Dixon Season 2 trailer, and I want to talk about the one moment that we are all waiting for, and it's likely going to happen this season, and that is Carol telling Daryl about Rick Grimes being alive. And so before we go any further, make sure to be a subscriber if you do want to get more Walking Dead content like this. I also wanted to mention, if you haven't checked out the panels yet for the Walking Dead at Comic-Con, I really recommend doing it. Like, honestly, I kind of preferred the Dead City panel. There was a lot more higher energy during the panel anyways, and Jeffrey Dean Morgan is just amazing. Lauren Cohen is really hilarious. So yeah, I definitely recommend checking those out. But yeah, I wanted to talk about this one idea here because I mean, now that we got the trailer, I figured that we should talk about Carol telling Daryl that Rick is alive. And obviously I'm assuming that that is what she meant. We still don't have any confirmation on that, like whether or not Carol meant that Rick came back, but she mentioned in episode 5 of season 1 of Daryl Dixon that someone came back, and I'm not entirely sure who she was referencing. I mean, she reached out to Daryl, obviously to tell him something, probably to check in on him and whatnot, and at the end, she was telling him that someone came back. We don't know who that is. I'm assuming based off of the Ones Who Lives ending that it was Rick, right? Like Rick came back. And so I'm guessing that that is going to be a reveal this season that Rick came back. And so I want to talk about that. I mean, I do think that there's going to be an aspect to this of, does Carol tell Daryl? Because if you think about Daryl and, you know, he's having a hard time deciding whether or not he wants to leave and go back to America. I think that if Daryl found out Rick was back, that maybe he would go back. And so, I don't know, maybe Carol doesn't tell him. But also there is the whole aspect of, well, if Daryl does find out that Rick came back, maybe he wouldn't be in a rush to come back immediately because he knows that Judith and RJ and everyone else are, you know, they're safe and they're with Rick and Michonne. And I wonder if that's going to be one of the first things they talk about, you know, when Daryl sees Carol is like, well, wait, where's Judith and RJ? Like, are they okay, sort of thing? So I think that this is going to be something that does obviously come up in season 2 here. Like, it's going to be something that comes up pretty much immediately, because the reason why Daryl was out there originally was to look for Rick, because he really believed that he was out there, and then ended up in France, and then all this other stuff is happening right now, right? So this is going to be something that does actually come up here. And when you look at the trailer, you know, you're looking at, well, which shots in the trailer here hint that, you know, this conversation is actually happening here. It's hard because you have to look at the shots in the trailer where it kind of makes sense that Daryl and Carol would be there. But if you look at the very final scene, you know, and you see Daryl and Carol there, I could see a scene like that actually making sense, you know, because you see Daryl, he just kind of looks like he's like just staring off and he's, you know, thinking about stuff. And then Carol, you know, afterwards walks up to talk to him. I could totally see this being a scene that would happen afterwards, you know, like maybe in this scene here, Daryl's just thinking a lot about Rick and etc. and Carol comes to talk with him. Or actually what probably would make a lot more sense is Daryl is just thinking about everybody back home and he really misses everyone back home. And so Carol walks up to him and it's just like, all right, we got to go. And then notices that something's wrong with Daryl and it's just like, what's wrong, kind of thing. But obviously she knows what's wrong with him. And so maybe that leads to a conversation, because this conversation I feel like has to happen. There's no way they're going to keep this going until season 3 and have this just be a thing for like however many seasons. Because then I feel like at some point Daryl's going to be like, why didn't you tell me right away? And I think the writers and everyone behind the scenes know that, you know, keeping a reveal like that is definitely, it's frustrating for fans. And we've learned that a lot during The Walking Dead. Like, there was so many reveals where it was like, just tell this person this information. It makes no sense to hold this information back. It really doesn't. And it just frustrated fans. Like, to me, the whole Judith thing throughout the last couple of seasons, it was just like, I don't understand why Judith isn't telling Daryl about the fact that Rick could actually be out there. I mean, I understood the explanation. I totally got that. But it was just like, it didn't really make a lot of sense, I think. And it was just very frustrating, I think, overall. But that's why I'm happy that that storyline is over, because that was frustrating, you know? And so I think that, like, obviously Carol doesn't have to say it right away. In the first episode, as soon as she sees Rick, she's not going to say it right away. Like, to me, that makes some sense. Like, you're going to wait until, you know, you have some time just to sort of relax and like whatever, you know, like whenever the time is right. Like, to me, that makes sense, but it has to happen this season. It can't happen in season 3. You're just waiting way too long at that moment, right? And I think that it makes sense that, you know, at some point here, Probably my guess is episode 5, because that seems to be like episode 5 seems to be the moment where they reveal a bunch of stuff like that. Like if you just look at the first seasons of all the spinoffs, like episode 5 was the one where they revealed a bunch of stuff. Like obviously I guess they did that beforehand too. Like episode 4 was that for The Ones Who Live, and then they've done that here and there, but episode 5 is always like the bigger episode. I guess it's because it's the penultimate episode, right? And so I think Dead City, I mean, maybe that's going to be episode 7, right? Because it's going to be 8 episodes that season. So to me, it doesn't seem like Carol is going to be telling Daryl right away. I think that it's going to be something that we have to wait for a little bit. It's going to happen probably later on in the season, which I think is really exciting. And I also wanted to point out as well that there is a new trailer out there. It's the same exact trailer, but I guess it's because the original trailer that we got, they edited some scenes and they cropped out certain characters to not be in certain scenes. And I have noticed this in recent years. This is something that I notice a lot, where when you're watching a trailer and you notice that there's a specific shot that looks very like low quality, it's because they zoomed in on that character specifically, or just on that shot in general, and they're cutting out other characters in the shot. And I don't want to spoil anything for that trailer, because I think that it kind of spoils a lot of the season. I mean, not necessarily we knew that moment was going to happen, and it doesn't really give away how it happens at all, but it's just one of those things where you're like, it's funny how whenever there's trailers that are released and just like other countries and stuff, like, you know, that you're always going to get different footage, or there's going to be spoilers that accidentally come out. And I don't know how you stop a lot of that. That stuff just happens a lot, and I'm not going to talk about that here. I mean, I know it was officially released, but I think just for that specifically, I mean, there is one aspect to it that I do want to talk about that I don't think is that spoilery, but because they actually tried to cut it out, I'm like, you know what, I will just I won't talk about it for now, but we'll wait and see what happens over the next month here, because obviously promotion is going to start to pick up quite a bit. This season is going to be really incredible, and I'm really excited for a lot of the different aspects to the season that, you know, we have to look forward to. Like obviously the variant walkers and all of that are going to be one aspect to it that's really exciting, and, you know, some of the returning characters and a lot of that. But I think Daryl finding out about Rick is going to be something that I hope they do really well, because I wasn't a fan of how they did it in the very final season of The Walking Dead. I think that reveal there was just done very fast, where Daryl really didn't say anything, and it was just like a lot of nothing in the scene. And I think just the way that it was done, it was just like, wait, what? Like, it wasn't an emotional scene, and it felt like, just based off of that story, because again, it happened in the very final episode, I believe, or it was episode 23 or something like that. And it was just, I think that, you know, the writers in that moment didn't realize how big of a moment that was for us, right? Like, a lot of fans really wanted to see that moment, and Daryl, I mean, he found out that Rick was alive, kind of, because the way that it was worded was like, Judith thinks that he could be out there, sort of thing, and Daryl just sort of reacts just like, you know, he's happy about it, but he doesn't really even say anything, so it's sort of hard to even read into anything that he's saying there. And so that's why, you know, a reveal like this, when you have two, you know, really amazing characters like Daryl and Carol in a scene together, and I just love the direction of Daryl Dixon in general, like the show, I think that having a scene where Carol is just like, Rick actually made it back home. Him and Michonne, they came back, and they're with Judith and RJ right now, and they're very happy. And if she explains some stuff and what it was like to see him, and just all the little details there, Daryl's gonna be like, you know what I mean? That's the stuff that I want. Those are the scenes that we want, where we can go back and rewatch that, and we're like, oh, just goosebumps, right? Like, just really amazing stuff. And that's what I wanted from Daryl finding out that Rick was alive. And so technically, I guess you could argue that he still doesn't know if he's alive or not, just that there's a possibility. And so I think that Daryl finding out here in season 2 that he made it back would be really amazing, unless Carol, you know, didn't actually mean Rick came back, which in that case, I'm just like, well, who was Carol talking about then? Because then I'm like really wondering, like, who was she actually talking about then? Because if it wasn't Rick, then I'm just like, well, then I got to think of the characters that would have made it back. And so obviously thinking of, I mean, I guess we've talked about this, Morgan obviously would have made it back, Dwight as well. So those are two characters, but I feel like for the story, it doesn't make a lot of sense to mention those characters. And the way that it was set up, you know, it was a much bigger deal, unless they're setting it up like Morgan or Dwight came back, and that's set up for Dead City. Then I could see that, but, you know, just based off of the filming and based off of a lot of what we've seen for Dead City, it doesn't seem like Dwight or Morgan, you know, will be on that show. Though I think Dwight, because of some of the stuff with filming with Fear the Walking Dead, I could totally see him showing up at the very end as a tease for season 3. But again, who knows, right? And I don't think that's going to be something that Carol mentions here. I really do think that she meant that Rick actually came back. And so that has to be a reveal this season, and I'm really excited to actually see that. You know, I talked about it in the beginning. I think that, you know, I really do recommend checking out the panel, because if you want to get sort of what the story is going to feel like going into the season, the panel really does hype you up quite a bit. Like, honestly, watching the panel, I just got so excited about The Walking Dead. I mean, Nick Cotero actually talks about the fact that, you know, he's been making zombies for 40 years now, you know, since Day of the Dead with George Romero. And that to me is just absolutely incredible, you know, and that was one of the biggest things for me personally about being a Walking Dead fan, was just like watching all of those moments and being a fan, you know. And that's something for me personally that I really do try to, like, because I talk about The Walking Dead, such a big part of my life, that a lot of it is just like, I forget what it's like sometimes to be just a fan of the show and just like watching the panel, watching them talk about this or that, because I always just sort of watch, like, you know, the show, and then I have to review it, I have to talk about this, break down this, you know. I'm not going to do a breakdown of the panel, I'm just going to enjoy this as a Walking Dead fan. It was just so refreshing, so I really do recommend checking it out. It was so much fun, and I really cannot wait for Daryl Dixon premiering basically next month. I mean, it's going to be August 1st tomorrow, so, you know, we'll be in August, and then we can say, oh, it's premiering next month, and finally, right? Because I've been seeing a lot of people saying, like, man, it's been so quiet, it's felt like there hasn't been a Walking Dead show in months, which is true. It's definitely been a very long time, and obviously we all thought that the show would be premiering by now, because they originally said summer, and I do think that by now we would probably be on like episode 2 or 3 of Daryl Dixon, but they pushed it off until September. But since we got the trailer and there's all this other stuff happening, apparently there's going to be a behind the scenes thing also released for Daryl Dixon, where they go back to, I guess it's going to be very similar to, you know, what Andrew Lincoln and Denai Guerrera did, where they went back to Alexandria and revisited a bunch of stuff. I think it's going to be Norman Reedus and Melissa McBride going back and revisiting certain things, you know, I guess certain moments with their characters and all of that. You know, Herschel's farm, or there could be props and whatnot related to, you know, I guess the Cherokee Rose scene. I'm really excited for that. I don't know when they're releasing that. I'm assuming it's going to be, you know, at some point in August. It's probably going to be late August, because I think over the next couple of weeks, we're going to see a lot of promotion. It's going to start to ramp up quite a bit here. And then obviously for all of September, it's just going to be crazy trailers and interviews, this and that coming out all the time. And yeah, I mean, get ready. It's going to be a lot of fun. So definitely post all your thoughts down below. Hope you guys all enjoyed the video, and I'll see you in the next one.